Hello and welcome to DFS Coach Talk. I am Joe Sarvati, affectionately known as Coach, and I am here with you today to discuss a really competitive 7-game NBA schedule here at DFS Coach Talk. If you're new to the show, we thank you for joining in. If you are a regular listener, we appreciate you. And all we ask for everybody that's listening in, if you're watching on YouTube, please take a second, hit the thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and click the little alarm up in the corner so that you know when our podcast posts. If you're listening audio-wise on everywhere podcasts can be heard, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, Podbean, we're basically everywhere. Take a second if you can, give us a 5 stars, quick positive comment. All of those things really help us move up the algorithm on both the audio and video podcasts so that we can get out there to more people. And we do the NBA podcast 7 days a week. So we want to keep doing that in front of the paywall. So please support us there by clicking those thumbs up and those quick subscribe buttons. Also, we have a weekly PGA podcast. And then as NBA winds down after the playoffs, MLB podcast will come back into play. And then before you know it, it'll be fall and we'll be back to the NFL pod. So we have you covered year round. We'd love to have you join us at DFS Coach Talk. Again, go to dfscoachtalk.com and you can sign up for a multitude of our passes. We do have a 3-day if you just want to dip your toe in the water and check us out for $10. And if you join today, if you're listening to this Saturday morning, you want to get involved with all of our activity this weekend, you get, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday for that quick pass. So we'd love to have you join us for sure. We're a growing community. I think we're the best DFS community on the planet, as I always say. So all right, let's dive into this 7-game slate. It's really interesting here. I can't remember a slate exactly like this. There's 3 early games, 2 at 7 and 1 at 7:30 Eastern. And then the majority of the main slate is all at 10 o'clock. There's 4 10 o'clock games. So as we normally do at Coach Talk, we cover the after-hours slate. So that's actually going to have more games than the early slate, which has 3. So very interesting. But our main slate that we'll be providing for will cover all 7. And then the after hours will have the late 4. So definitely join us for those. All right, the first game is 7 o'clock Eastern. It's the Washington Wizards at 31 and 36 and the Indiana Pacers at 31 and 35. The probable lineups as they sit right now, earlier Saturday morning, we've got Westbrook, Neto, Beal, Hashimura, and Len against Brogdon, who is questionable, Holiday, McDermott, Brissett, and Sabonis. Real quickly on the lines here, we've got Washington minus 3.5. And if you're ready for this one, I bet you Andrew's jealous he doesn't get to be on the podcast to do this one. 247.5 for this game. So that's one of the bigger ones of the season. We haven't seen a 250 one yet, and that one's pretty darn close. And the reason that is you've got the fastest paced team in the league in Washington and the 5th fastest in Indiana. And you have 2 defenses that are not that good. Washington's 20th, but they have played better. And Indiana's 14th, but they're having all kinds of internal problems. I don't know if you followed some of the news with the Pacers. One of the assistant coaches got into it with Goga Bitadze, the backup center, right on the sidelines. They had to split them up. It was not good. And I guess there's problems in the locker room. They're just having all kinds of issues there. So they're trying to hold on to a play-in spot in the East. So we'll see how they do against this Washington team. As far as the injuries in this game, you've got Lamb questionable, Sumner questionable, and as I mentioned, Brogdon questionable. So the news will definitely help here. But at 247.5, with this type of pace, there's no possible way you can walk away from this game without having multiple people. It's unavoidable and unfadable, by far the best game on the slate, in my opinion. And I'm planning on coming out of this game with 4 guys or an absolute bare bones minimum of 3. First guy in my lineup is Russell Westbrook. Until they price him like something stupid like 1350 or 1380, I'm going to keep playing him. I mean, he's been performing to his number, even though it's high, and even smashing that at times. If you look back at his last dozen games, it's 50s, 70s, 80s in DFS points. Amazing run. So I don't know how you don't look at him here, especially if Brogdon's out, because Brogdon is a decent defender. Not that anybody can defend Russ when he's playing like this, but if he doesn't play, which he hasn't played in a while, and he's been listed as questionable for 3 games in a row, so you got to almost anticipate that he's not going to play. But either way, Westbrook is the first building block in for me. You can't afford to play catch up. If he throws up one of his 85 fantasy point games, which he could in a pace game like this. Raul Neto, it's pronounced, by the way. I found that out. I was always called him Raul Neto, but he's from Spain, and it's Howell Neto. The R's are pronounced like H's. Just something I thought enlightened me a bit the other day. But the reason they talk so much about him is he had his career game last time out. So I'm not one to chase career games. I always anticipate regression. Now, you can look at it the other direction. This is actually a better matchup than he had the last game when he had his career high. So his price is decent. I think he's worth considering. He's not a plug and play for me, but considering that he's hot, he's confident right now, a huge pace game, he is in consideration as a value play. Bradley Beal, very expensive. It's very hard to roster both Westbrook and Beal, and try to build something from there. I'm not counting it out yet. I'm really not. Washington's been on a run. They're playing their key guys more minutes than they normally do. This is an island game for them. So there is a possibility that I could go Westbrook and Beal and make this, pretty much an all-in game for me. But I will also look at a couple of the other guys. Hashimura is back. He's very cheap as for the amount of minutes he plays. Not willing to get involved in the Alex Len thing. I think some people will jump into that because of this game is such a high total game. I still see him splitting time with Lopez and the guy that I think should be playing 35 minutes a game, Gafford, but Brooks doesn't see it that way. He likes to rotate all 3 of them. So not interested there. On the Indiana side, if Brogdon's in, he immediately becomes playable if he doesn't have a minutes restriction. If they're going to play him 20, 25 minutes, then he's out for me. The obvious big price, big name guy on the other side for Indiana is Sabonis. He's playing terrific, but his price is extremely high, and not sure I'll be able to afford that side. I'd prefer to go with O'Shea Brissett. His price is up, but it's much, much cheaper than Sabonis. Based on everybody that's out, especially if Lamb and Sumner remain out there, just shorthanded, especially at the bigs. I would assume Goga will get some minutes at center, probably splitting that with Sabonis a little bit, and Sabonis gets a little extra minutes at the 4. So that could be a concern for Brissett. So going to, double check and take a look at that and see how it pans out. But the guy that is affected if Lamb and Sumner are out again is Dougie McBuckets. McDermott's had some big games all of a sudden, very efficient scoring games. When he gets the minutes, the dude can definitely score. So I know I'm spending a lot of time on this first game, but it is the most important game on the entire slate. And, so to review for me, I'm Westbrook plug and play. Howell Neto will be a consideration. I definitely I'm interested in Beal, and Hashimura is also a consideration. On the Indiana side, if Brogdon's in with no minutes restriction, he will be a consideration. I think if Lamb and Sumner are out, Doug McDermott is a consideration. O'Shea Brissett is a possibility. Want to see the news on any of the other bigs for Indiana. And being that this is the first game on the slate, we'll have the news. And then, the pay up possibility, if you really want to correlate and expect this game to blow up, then Sabonis is the obvious play, best player on the floor for Indiana. So, it could go anywhere from 3 guys, good exposure, to 4 or 5 guys all in on this game for me. All right, let's move to game 2. Not nearly as exciting, that's for sure. The Detroit Pistons at 20-47 at the Philadelphia 76ers, 46-21. We've got tons of news on Detroit here that we'll go over. I expect some news from Philly to drop. We haven't gotten any of that yet, but it's the second night of a back-to-back. And unexpectedly last night, they had to play their regulars all the way down to the buzzer to win that game that looked as though it was going to be a complete blowout against the Rockets. So it definitely changes the dynamics for this second night of a back-to-back. It's an island game for Detroit. Their probable starters right now are Corey Joseph, Frank Jackson, Sadiq Bey, Jeremy Grant, who's questionable, and Mason Plumlee. He's expected back this game. But listen to this injury report. Grant questionable, Ellington questionable, Josh Jackson out, Diallo out, and then we mentioned Corey Joseph is questionable. So we need that news for sure. Simmons, Curry, Green, Harris, and Embiid, the regular 5 for Philly, but I don't believe that stands. I think Philly may sit someone. Now, they are trying to finish out with a lot of momentum and a bunch of wins and try to secure a top spot. So it's possible, but I would sit tight. It is the other 7 o'clock Eastern game, so we'll also have news on that. So look forward to seeing what that is. All right, game 3, Memphis Grizzlies and Toronto Raptors. That is at 7:30 p.m. The Grizz are 33-33. Toronto's 27-40. Definitely big news in this game. You've got Memphis. You know what? I don't think I said the spread in the last game. Let me go back there 1 second. Philadelphia is a 10.5-point favorite against Detroit, and it's a 218.5 over/under. So it's almost 30 points lower than the first game, which is definitely a sign of to be worried about. Pace 22-11, defense 16-2. So again, not a key game by any stretch, but we need to see who the final call is on who's in and who's out. All right, back to Memphis and Toronto. Memphis is a 5-point favorite. It's a 227.5 over/under. Pace, Memphis is 8th, Toronto 13, so above normal pace. But the defenses are pretty solid, 9th and 11th, respectively, for Memphis and Toronto. Right now, Grayson Allen is out for Memphis, and Toronto has their 2 studs. Actually, their starting 1, 2, 3 all out. Van Vliet, Lowry, and Anunoby are all out. So that brings some guys back into play that we have sort of just made a living on here in the last month. And that's Malachi Flynn and Khem Birch have both been terrific at decent prices. Now, they've both had prices rise a little bit. And that's something you have to consider. But they've done a fantastic job under the circumstances. So on the Toronto side, you have to look at Malachi Flynn and Gary Trent. Gary Trent is back, and he's a scorer. He should get more shots up than anybody else on this team. The only problem that I see is I think he's going to get Dylan Brooks' defense, and that backs me up a bit because he's a dog out there defensively, and I would assume that's who he's going to guard. So a little reserve there. Stanley Johnson, who's their third projected starter, has no offensive game. I'm not interested there at all. And then the obvious play, he'll probably be chalky because he's the only all-star remaining for Toronto that's in the lineup, and that's Pascal Siakam. Um, it's a big pay up. He's costly, and he does get Kyle Anderson defense, who's tough, and he'll get he may even get some Dylan Brooks D because he'll be the guy that they're going to focus on most stopping. But in play, he's going to take a ton of shots. He will get the ball inside. I think Trent thrown from the outside, Pascal pretty much on the inside and mid-range, and then an occasional three from Flynn will be the bulk of their defense. Now, Khem Birch has been getting pretty consistent run, big minutes. They're really taking a look at him for next season. And, he's done a fantastic job. He's involved, on the defensive side with some stocks. He gets a lot of rebounds, and he can score the ball. And, he even knocked down a couple threes. So definitely playable guys on the Toronto side that you get really good minutes and usage from because of the three bigs out for Toronto, the three guards. So Flynn, Trent, Siakam, Birch, all in consideration for me in this game. On the other side of the ball, it's not as easy because other than Grayson Allen, you've got starters that, should get very good minutes. Jaws playable, Dylan Brooks with bigger minutes. His price isn't too bad. Kyle Anderson's price has gone up a bit. Joe Val is playable, but man, does he get in foul trouble a lot. I mean, it's really frustrating when he's going well and then boom, he's got his second in the, right away in the first quarter, or he picks up that third midway through the second and sits the rest of the half. So I'm a little concerned there, and there's some other centers that I'd like to focus on, but I think you can consider some of these Memphis guys. The 227.5 total is reasonable, and I think a one-off on each side is very doable here. All right, we go into the last four games, which bizarrely enough are all 10 o'clock Eastern games. So pretty cool. Brooklyn is 43-24, Denver 44-23. So should be an outstanding matchup. Brooklyn's favored by 4, and it's a 230.5 over-under. I think the reason Brooklyn's favored is because Denver's playing the second night of a back-to-back, and they just lost to Utah last night in a real grudge match game. So it's going to be a tough back-to-back for them against a very talented Brooklyn team. The injuries here, Chiozza, and we know Harden's out for Brooklyn. And then we know that we've got some questionable designations for Denver that we have to see with Barton and Morris. They haven't played in a while, but they're both listed questionable here. We do know that PJ Dozier is out. So the projected lineups are Irving, Shamet, Duran Harris, and Blake Griffin at center. How do you not consider Irving or Durant on this slate? I mean, you got to look at both of them. If you're not going to go all big money in that Washington-Indiana game, if you fade either Westbrook, Beal, or Sabonis, you can probably squeeze up to a Kyrie, but it's going to be tough with Durant. He's more expensive, but they're both expensive. So, you have to make that determination early if you want exposure in this game. Of course, Kyrie and Durant on any given night, it's so hard to, just fade them. It's a decent matchup for Kyrie against Campazzo or whoever they bring in at points. I mean, Kyrie could have his way here. We've got, as far as speed goes, Brooklyn's 12th in pace. So that's solid, but Denver's 26th. So does that limit the opportunities for Brooklyn? I doubt that Denver wants to let Brooklyn get out and run the floor. So that is a bit of a concern with spending up for the Brooklyn guys. Defensively, they're 21st and 13th. So, that gives you some optimism that there can be some good DFS is what I'm trying to say, scores here. So, really pivotal game, one to definitely take a look at, and certainly some playable parts. All right, the second 10 o'clock game, Oklahoma City Thunder at 21 and 46 at the Golden State Warriors at 34 and 33. So we've got, Golden State scrambling. Oklahoma City's been pretty much a rotation show of their young guys, seeing what they got and checking it out. Very interesting. It is the first night of a back-to-back for Oklahoma City. So that rotation of 10, 11 guys may come into play again, which is not DFS friendly. The other aspect of this is Golden State's a 14.5 point favorite, and it's a 223 over under. So the big question is Curry one of the pay up guys? Because that's going to be in lieu of one of the other guys we've already mentioned. I mean, you can't play all of them. Something's got to give somewhere. And yes, Curry is a fine play here. Dort is questionable on the other side. So, he'd probably try to guard Curry a little bit. Not that I think he'd have much success doing so, but, that's one situation. The concern I have is the blowout potential here as well. Curry could go bananas if the game stays close. And yesterday was a perfect example of guys that, we thought Embiid's game was going to be a blowout, and he crushed it, and that went all the way down to the wire. We thought Giannis's game was going to be a blowout. That game went down to the wire, and he crushed it. So, I know projecting blowouts and trying to consider that in your build is dangerous because of what happened yesterday. That happens, but it also works the other direction for us if we see that coming and, people spend top dollar on a guy and then he doesn't get many minutes in the second half. It can go either way. For this game, I have a little bit more of a tendency to feel like this game could blow out. So I'm not as fond of the Curry play here, but I think he's going to be very chalky in a game where he should dominate with really nobody to guard him on the other side. So very tough one. The other person out is Pokacheski for Oklahoma City. Projected starters for OKC is Maledon, Dort. He's questionable though. Baisley, Roby, and Brown, so the bigs that they've been playing. And then Golden State has been with this lineup recently and done pretty well with Bazemore, Green, and Looney. As far as who's playable, if you want exposure to this game, it's 223. It's reasonable. Baisley's been good on a pretty consistent basis, but it's Baisley and Bazemore in the all Bays contest here. But Baisley's got the height on him and size. So, I think Baisley's not a bad play at all. I wish his price was a little bit lower. And then as far as Moses Brown, he's had a few games where he's gotten the extra minutes and really produced. He's a kind of guy that, for some reason, if he gets 30 minutes, he can break the slate. But, he's been splitting time with his bigs, getting a look at a lot of different guys, and it makes it very hard to depend on big minutes from those guys for sure. On the Golden State side, if you don't want to spend the huge money for Curry but want exposure here, you can get Wiggins, Bazemore, Green at somewhat reasonable prices. They're not, I wouldn't call them value. Bays is probably value, but the other two mid-level, and Green pushing into almost the upper level. But, if the game stays close, this is going to be a super high scoring game, in my opinion. And I think all of them can be plugged in. So I would like some exposure here. Not going to be a crazy game for me, but to have a guy, a one-off here or there with each team, I think is a smart play. All right, 2 games left. San Antonio Spurs 32-34 at the Portland Trailblazers 38-29. We've got both teams on the second night of a back-to-back. So Spurs on the second night of a back-to-back. Ask Dirk. He'll tell you. He always weighs in on the Spurs. It's a roulette game when you're trying to figure out what to do with San Antonio on a back-to-back. But they're fighting for their playoff lives at 32-34, trying to get into that tournament. So I mean, they got to play some of their main guys, but how much, I don't know. So Portland's only favored by 6. It's 231.5. So even though it's 16 points lower than that Washington-Indiana game, it is the second highest game total in Vegas on the board. So what I would say is, you can look at this game if you want to be risky on the Spurs side. DeJounte Murray and DeMar DeRozan are definitely their 2 best players. I think that Portland's backcourt is not good and defensively, and I think both of those guys could have solid games. Definitely think both of them are in play. Jakob Poeltl maybe going against Nurkic. He did pretty well this last time, but a little pricier than I'd like. And then you've got his foul issues. I'll get a lot of times in foul trouble too. On the Portland side, of course, Lillard, McCollum playable, but not the top of the list for me on this card against a San Antonio team that doesn't defend well, but they do have some good individual defenders like Murray, who's a steals machine. Norman Powell, he's probable. He should be in there. The only guys out are Lyles for San Antonio. Is the only guy out that I see as of right now. So definitely a possibility here for a second flight guy if you want to go Powell. Covington's been slumped. I wouldn't recommend that. Nurkic, if you can accept that he's going to lose some minutes to Canner. They're all possible plays. Even though this is the second highest total, I'm not thrilled about this game because the back-to-back for both teams, and not sure, if that's going to create more of a rotation of players. And there's so many great plays and great value on the rest of the slate. I'm not going to overpress in this game. If I can fit one of the guys from a salary standpoint, like a Murray or DeRozan, I would have no problem going there, but I'm not going to race to do that. All right, last game on the slate. It is the Houston Rockets 16-51 against the Utah Jazz 49-18. Both played last night. Houston took Philly to the wire. Utah went to the somewhat the wire with Denver and won that game. We still have Conley and Mitchell, the starting backcourt for the Jazz, out. We have all kinds of crazy designations for Houston. We don't know what any of them mean because they have to be announced. But this is the honest to goodness truth. I'm going to read this right off of the screen. Here's who they have listed right now and their designation. Porter questionable, Bradley questionable, Tate questionable, Wood questionable, Olynyk probable, Brown questionable, Gordon out, Wilson questionable, Porter, I said questionable, but more like out, and then Nwaba out, and Christian Wood questionable. So I mentioned a few of those two, but they have them all listed. So I mentioned a couple of them twice. They have a couple of new guys in the mix there too, because they have to have 8 to fill the team. Augustine played quite a few minutes last night. There's all kinds of options there, but it all comes down to one thing: is who's in and who's out. If they're going to play like they did the last 2 games, they were able to squeeze 8 guys on the roster, but it only played 7. So they played 7-man rotations, and that usually means boxcars. Olynyk busted 50. Basically the main guys that are playing those 35, 38, 40 minutes like Armani Brooks, who's more than likely in. Those are all considerations. So it's based on the news, which doesn't help you on the main slate that much because you've got to make a decision. But the good thing is, what I'm going to do, I'm going to anticipate playing two of the Rockets, and I'm going to plug them into my main slate lineup. With 4 games, having 8 teams all starting at 10 o'clock, it's not going to be any issue whatsoever to rotate them out, switch to either another Houston guy or one of the other guys. But I do want exposure from Houston, not because it's a good matchup, because Utah's D is tough. It's at Utah. They're tired from last 2 games playing shorthanded. But the bottom line is any NBA player in a 7-man rotation that's going to get almost 40 minutes, you'd have to be pretty darn bad to not be considered, because minutes equal money in this league a lot of times. And you see guys just, blowing up the stats, blowing up the slate because of that, opportunity to play that many minutes. So I will have probably 2 guys exposure in this Houston game. And I'll wait to make that change late in the slate, and should have plenty of opportunities to flip-flop guys. So, who those 2 are going to be right now, I'm not sure. If Tate is in without limits, he's certainly a guy I'd love to go to. There's a lot of guys here that we need to consider for sure. Kenyon Martin Jr., KJ, he had a terrific game last game. He's, probably the other one's high on my list because, he should be playing monster minutes, and he is such an athletic guy. Really enjoy rostering him. All right, on the Utah side, with Conley out, they've pretty much been going with Ingles, O'Neal, Bogdanovich, Niang, and Gobert. They've been winning some games and getting it done. Last night was Bogdanovich. We have Coach Bogdan, known as Andrew, but it's not this Bogdan. It's the other Bogdan from Atlanta. But this one dropped a cool 48 last night, real points. So, is he on fire to want to play again? I don't know, man. That's risky. I mean, his price is right, but do we go there? I'm considering it. I've always been a Bogdanovich fan since the last Olympics, when he led the Olympics in scoring, which he did, and any of the USA guys, anybody. So, I mean, he's an accomplished professional shooter that had some top-notch experience in Europe, and he's done it here in this league for a consistent couple of years with the Nets and then the Jazz. So, he's still on my radar. I'm going to consider that. You can always look at Clarkson or Ingles in a scenario where Conley's out. And being the fact that, you look at the pace in this game, 6th for Houston, 16th for Utah. So even Utah is not playing slow. Bad defense at Houston at 26, in Utah 3. So it is, it does make for a good run game as far as pace and, going against defense and the opportunities that you're going to get within. So both on the back of second night of back-to-back could lengthen the rotations a little bit, but that's really not an option for Houston with the shorthandedness. But not going to really chase to a bunch of Utah guys. Wouldn't mind putting in a Bogdanovich or Clarkson or Ingles, somebody that would fit into the lineup. Not going to pay up for Gobert, though, in this matchup. All right. I think that is it. Really appreciate everybody listening in. If you're catching this on Saturday morning, perfect time to join us. Go to dfscoachtalk.com. Sign up for any of our packages. We have as little as a 3-day $10 package. And also, check us out everywhere on social media. We're everywhere. DFS Coach Talk on Twitter. We're on Facebook, Instagram. We're all over the place. So definitely check us out. Give us a like. If you have any questions or want to make some comments, at DFS Coach Talk on Twitter, you can just DM us there. We'll be happy to get back to you. We do have some exciting announcements coming this coming week. We have a new package that we're going to unveil this week that is for the NBA playoffs. And that is a 2-month time frame that goes on, believe it or not. And, that's starting sooner than later. So we'll be announcing that this coming week. And if you're one of our members that's listening in at noon today, we have our weekly members only meeting. This week, where the subject is bankroll management and how that combines with contest selection. So great info, great minds in our meetings every Saturday. So we'd love to have you join us. If you want to jump in, make sure you get in time. Again, you can DM us at DFS CoachTalk on Twitter, and we'll make sure you're in there in time for the meeting. So thank you so much for listening in. I appreciate it. I will be back again tomorrow for the slate. And again, we're covering baseball, basketball, and golf right now. We focus on the main sports, and we take a deep dive, drill down on each game for each slate. So we're excited to share that with you, and I appreciate you again for listening in. And we'll catch you again tomorrow when we look to crush it in DFS.